The Black Founders of Civilization. In the preceding chapters, we saw that one of the main factors that is responsible for the differences is cultural expressions. It is the division of the brain into two hemispheres, each which is owned peculiar way of thinking. We were able to go ahead the mere listings of the cultural traits of nations and to catalog them into two fundamental sets based on the traits of each hemisphere of the brain. For example, if it's not shown why, it is of no use to say that the fundamental traits of Black cultures are the burial of the dead and the communication with ancestors, high recognition of women, and female divine powers, high degree of social stratifications, high degree of stratifications of the celestial hierarchy of powers controlling events on earth, and the involvement of religion in every area of life. We also saw these are the results of people's mental output dominated by the side of the brain whose strong point is trance. White culture, which is extroverted, the left hemispheric, pronounced and sustains a culture that cremated its dead, or before with contact with Black people, cremated itself dead, or exposed them to be eaten by animals, and has a negative attitude toward and horror of spirits of the dead to this day, holds its women and female divine powers in low self-esteem. In Christian divine pantheon is made of a father, a son, and a ghost, for example. Low degree of social stratification and the love of freedom from authority that goes with it, laissez-faire. The separation of religion from all other social institutions, the government, educators, all of them. And the restriction of the divine to special places and times, such as churches and Sunday schools and holidays and etc. The separation of the divine from healing and so on. So if you can't help thinking this way, it's because the left side of the brain is dominating your thinking. So keeping these ideas firmly in awareness, let's attempt to establish the racial characteristics of certain nations of antiquity. The importance of knowing the racial identity of the nations that were the founders of civilization lies in the fact that, one, religious doctrines and systems cannot be understood in a vacuum. They cannot be separated from the social environment that produced them. The various components of this religious system of each nation are, for example, ritual vehicles to condition the population to support or reject particulars of interest or detriment to the nation. The ritual system of Osiris, will always remain a mystery to people who have no understanding of the African kingship and the history of the peculiar difficulties that the Comatians experience with their kingship. In the same way, people who know little regarding the African queen mothership and high prestigeship. For example, the rituals performed with the skeletal remains of the deceased kings will understand little regarding the ritual system of Uset, which is Isis. 2, the white nations who become the heirs of these civilizations understood only the external aspects, while what appealed to the left side of the brain, and the distorted and spiritual, which is the internal and right-minded. What passes for the world's major religions are attempts of the left side of the brain to practice what can only be done by the right side. Can you imagine where chemistry would be today if it were in the hands of poets' right-sided function? Each element would no longer be complex of exact weight or electrical behavior, but gray clouds or wolves, according to the poet's mood. Now, this is what the sons of Yerushia have done to the science of religion. The results is that with the destruction of the ancient black founders of civilization, some 4,000 to 2,000 years ago, the world has been plunged into a spiritual dark age, and it is sinking ever into that jaw whose fiery tongue flickers with death. And 3, the solution to our problem is the restitution of the science of life that actually gave birth to civilization. The only way that this can be done is by correlating the spiritual doctrines and religions, practices of the founding civilization with those of the black civilizations of today. This is of extreme importance for the simple fact that most students of spiritual culture and erectorism have received their education from Western organizations and who have falsely claimed that they are the custodians of the wisdom of the ancients. Now, after going through this book, the reader can then decide if it is true. Last but not least, we will come to the understanding that religion cannot be saved as mankind unless it is allowed to govern all social institutions. All such teachings regarding the lone sage and individual salvation will be seen to be, on one hand, natural concepts of the left side of the brain with this isolationist thinking, and on the other, to be important as far as being vehicles for the spiritual upliftment of the world. Now, in our study, we will see that when the white nations adopted the religious institutions of the black, they only allowed those doctrines that did not interfere, for the most part, with their most cherished social belief, whether they were right or wrong. Now, in fact, many of the religious myths and doctrines have their origin in the political competition that arose out of their contacts with blacks. The extreme manner in which women were humiliated in the Semitic Asian 4,000 years ago made the source of all of mankind's suffering, the heavenly loop-sided adultery laws against them, and etc. That was 4,000 years ago in the Semitic Asia. For example, was chiefly due to the fact that the occupations of very high positions of the black women of Canaan, Sumer, Phoenicia, etc., was seriously challenged to the patriotic system of the whites, as it filled the heads of their women with another view of social possibilities. In those days, the white people of Mesopotamia were under the culture, if not political denomination, of blacks. Establishing the racial identity of the founders of civilization is a simple matter, yet the issue needs to be heavily detailed so that there is no room for doubt. Western writers have tried so hard to hide the fact of the blackness of these civilizations that their culture is so distorted and misunderstood, and their descendants, modern-day blacks, have been totally culturally defranchised.